Now let's turn to a problem that's going to be a significant problem in for philosophers of the early modern period, the philosophers we'll be studying, and that has to do with philosophy of religion. And we're going to consider this one of these central problems in philosophy of religion, that is what's sometimes called the problem of justifying religious belief. And I ask the question, have you guys ever thought about religious matters? And I think for most of you, you certainly have considered certain religious matters. One of them is, well, does God exist? And I can assure you, except for the one of you, two of you who've never given this any thought, and I might try to, I might take a bet that if we were some way of proving it, that you actually have thought about it and have a position. And when you see what the positions are, I think you can agree that where you are at least fits in. That is, there are three kind of positions you could take about this important religious matter, whether the God exists. One is that you could believe that God exists. You take the position that God exists. You're a theist. And for people who think that God exists, when they're trying to justify their belief that God exists, sometimes they cite the universe's existence, that somehow the universe exists, and therefore there must have been a God to cause the universe to come into existence. So you think of God as the first cause. Some people take a slightly different tack with the same or at least part of the same evidence. That is, that if you look around, the universe looks like it was intelligently designed. And everything that we know about that's been intelligently designed, that looks like it's intelligently designed, has actually been designed by a person. For instance, if you guys are walking along the beach and you find a watch in the sand, you don't say, wow, look, this is a very interesting shell that naturally came about. No, you say, gee, somebody actually made that. Well, people think if you look at the universe or look at certain parts of it, you're going to see that there must have been, it exhibits intelligent design, and there must have been a designer. And there are people who have taken this view to the point that they think that they have a theory about where everything comes from, and that's something that today is known as creationism. Now, there's one reason that some theists have that I'm not sure anybody really tries to justify their belief in God today, at least, using this one, although some of the characters in our story are going to take this position, is that it's going to be almost like a mathematical proof. That is, they think that you can prove that there has to be a greatest being, and what would that greatest being be? God. Then there are people who base it on sense evidence, kind of like history. God told, fill in the blank, I'll take the Western religions, in historical order. God told Abraham or Moses that whatever he told them. Well, if God told them, he must exist. God told Jesus that something. Well, if God told Jesus something, he must exist. And God told Muhammad that so Muhammad must exist. So we have these holy writings, and the same way we know that George Washington exists, we know that God exists. And people who think that God exists in the ethical realm think that the God determines right or wrong. We could spend more. Another position you could take is that God does not exist, and that's an atheist position. And oftentimes atheists, in justifying their position, cite the amount of evil in the world, that there's just too much evil in the world for there to be a benevolent God. And finally, there are people who look at the evidence and they end up doing what we call suspending judgment, not believing that God exists, not believing that God does not exist, but rather they're not sure what to believe. And these guys are agnostics.